Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome back to Adventure Capital, where we not only discuss the entrepreneurial journeys and adventures with founders who have raised capital on WeFunder, but also the different resource providers and mentors helping founders along the way. Huzzah! In this episode, Jonny talks with Tyler Hayes, founder and CEO of Atomlens, who are building revolutionary prosthetics to end physical disability. In their second WeFunder campaign, Atomlens has now raised $3.5 million from 2,500 investors. People that, in Tyler's words, share their crazy, which is what WeFunder is all about. Before we get on with the podcast, we're required to let everyone know that anything we say here should not be interpreted as investment advice, recommendations, or soliciting investments in any company. All companies raising on WeFunder are given an equal opportunity to participate in the podcast based on the progress of their campaign. WeFunder gang, take it away.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Adventure Capital by WeFunder. Today we're really delighted to have Tyler Hayes with us, founder and CEO of Atomlens. Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Oh man, it's great to be here. Thanks, Jonny.
Tyler, maybe you could start with just a bit of a personal background. What's your story and how did you come to be running this company?
Well, farm boy made it to the big city. That's the story. Grew up in Minnesota. I don't actually know if you know that. I grew up in Minnesota and I lived there for 20 years and then moved out to San Francisco when I went to South by Southwest one time. And I was like, wow, what is this? This is pretty crazy.
Like, where in Minnesota?
West suburbs, west of Minneapolis, 45 minutes west. If people actually know the area, I'll just say kind of by Lake Minnetonka, which I feel like is one place a lot of people know because of Prince.
Lake Minnetonka.
Yeah. But moved out to San Francisco 15 years ago. Been doing the startup game for 15 years. Started companies, sold companies, bought companies, spun out products, all of it, all across the board. Academically, my background was studied psychology and neuroscience. Wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and then bailed at the last second on going pre-med when some neurosurgeons I was shadowing basically said, you have ADHD, you're gonna go crazy doing this. You're gonna be reading books for 15 years. You don't want to do that. So became an entrepreneur instead.
Amazing, bit of career advice.
Honestly, they saved me for sure. Yeah.
Seems like you embarked then on a better path for Tyler Hayes.
Well, hopefully there's probably a bizarro one of me in some other parallel universe that's doing that. We'll see.
That's a neurosurgeon. So that's kind of, and then, tell us what is Atomlens, and also, curious how the founding myths of the company.
Sure, fair enough. The founding myths. I don't know if there's any strong myths yet.
The lore with an ORE at the end.
Yeah, what's the canon for our company? Yeah. Well, Atomlens, our mission is to end physical disability. And we aim to do that by making breakthrough artificial limbs to start and then expand to other parts of the human body after that. By the way, just to be clear, what I mean there is a couple things. When I say end physical disability, I do not mean, take disabled people and make their lives harder. Don't stop making accessible products. We need to keep making accessible products, wheelchairs, ramps, accessible buildings, accessible silverware, all those kind of things. But we believe that making breakthrough artificial limbs to actually start to significantly restore functionality for people is just a path we need to be walking anyway. In 100 years as a species, we really should be able to look back and say, hey, remember how we cured polio in the 20th century? Gosh, wasn't that great that we finally, ended the concept of permanent disability or injury in the 21st century? No one should have to live without an arm or a leg. That's just crazy at this point. We have electric cars, we have reusable rockets, we have the technology.
And when you say breakthrough technology, what does that mean?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't know about prosthetics today, these hook arms and these, blade legs and stuff that's kind of the most advanced. Everything you see in movies and TV is the most advanced prosthetic. There is no hidden, secret, amazing prosthetic that a bunch of people who've lost limbs have that we've never seen. And on average, a hook hand for someone costs $20,000 to insurance. In a state-of-the-art leading prosthesis today, a myoelectric hand or arm, $100,000, no problem. Maybe 150 or 200 grand, which is just unacceptable. And they just can't do much. You can't control your fingers. You don't have a sense of touch. They cause all sorts of back pain and skeletal issues. and we could do better. So our thinking is we brought together people who were leaders at Apple, Tesla, IDEO, Intel, Google, who created the original iPhone, who created the original iMac and the Tesla Roadster. And we said, what if we take that kind of thinking? What if we take real consumer products industry thinking and approach to this industry, bring modern robotics, modern wearables, modern AI and software to an industry that's just desperately in need of them?
Why? I mean, this is probably a dumb question because there's a lot of industries that like need disruption. But yeah, why is this kind of why is Atomlens so much kind of further along? What's the kind of the impediments today?
Well, I mean, I don't think the industry would admit this, but they just don't really innovate. It's not a lot of innovation in that industry. The leading companies, they're basically big holding companies. They're mostly orthotics companies too. They don't really make prosthetics. They make like shoe inserts and ankle braces and stuff.
Well, yeah.
So their prosthetics, they actually just make those because they acquired them from other companies. So quite honestly, this industry is about 20 years old. Like the leading stuff was invented in 2005. The leading hands were invented almost 20 years ago, and they haven't improved them since then because they don't care to, they don't really need to. Insurance is just the right kind of corrupt where they can keep getting, $100,000 for these things. So it really does take someone to come in and say like, let's kickstart this.
Hey Tyler, sorry, I'm gonna just interrupt for a second because
sure.
This internet connection is failing me right now. So
oh yeah, dude.
Shift to my phone here. So give me 1 second.
Go for it, man.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Is it any better for you?
Okay. Yeah. So let's see where to go from. Maybe the question about because it was breaking up a little bit towards the end. So maybe just a question again of like why like what do you mean by breakthrough?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Let's do it. So
let me ask a question. Yeah. So what do you mean by breakthrough technology?
Yeah, breakthrough in this case means 10 to 100 times better than what exists today. And what that literally means is cheaper, faster, lighter, stronger. But those are all buzzwords. What does it actually mean? It means the devices that exist today, the leading prosthetics in the world today that cost $100,000 to $200,000, and that is the real price for the ones today, they do not have sense of touch. You can't control the fingers. They weigh 5 to 10 pounds. They cause back pain and musculoskeletal issues. They're not comfortable to wear all day. They look ugly. The way that you get them fitted to you is you literally plaster cast your stump like you would see, for making a cast in a movie, and then they mold a stump for you. So for us, breakthrough means really three things. It means bringing modern robotics, modern wearables, and modern AI to this industry. Stuff that's at the cutting edge now, but still we can still use it in a commercial product. It's still cheap enough and it's good enough.
So robotics and wearables is kind of easier to understand. What does AI look like?
Like for our product, yeah. Basically, it looks like, imagine, Jonny, you cut your arm off above your elbow today, which would suck. Let's not do that. So if you lost your arm above your elbow, and we wanted to listen to your body's signals to try and we give you a robotic limb to let you think and make it move. Well, how do we do that? We could go straight to your brain to try to get signals, but that's insanely invasive and too early. We could try to go invasive to your peripheral nerves, but that's, again, very invasive and the science isn't really there yet. It's not all the way there. So what we do is we put a device around your stump, like a bracelet that uses surface electromyography or SEMG, same thing your doctor uses to listen to your muscle signals. And we listen to your muscle signals. Now there's a new problem though. Why AI? Because if we're listening to the signals that come from your muscles, that's not 100%, so to speak, of the signal that's coming from your brain, right? It's sort of like 80 to 90% of everything we need to try to recreate your movement. So AI is to fill in the blanks. We can train it to know, oh, you're trying to reach for a doorknob. You're trying to grab that can. You want to shake someone's hand. and it can help to assist you in those things. So it's not doing it, instead of you. It's not moving on its own. It's just assisting you.
Love it. Why did you have the idea for this company? Why are you building this company of all the companies you could be building?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, it's because I don't want to die, which I legitimately want to live forever, and I want to do it healthily, and I want to give other people the ability to do that. And I think a lot of people do want to do that. You shouldn't be forced to do it if you don't want to. But so when we sold Bebo to Amazon a few years ago, that was my third company. And for me, I'm in my mid-30s. I'm thinking, I really want to kind of get back to my roots, in the science side of things, and the fundamental, meaningful problems for people, homelessness, poverty, disability. That's where I like to play. And so I literally made a stacked ranked spreadsheet of all the technologies we could make or commercialize or whatever. And this one was just far and away above the rest, within the scope of recreating the human body, so we can start to replace it and make it better. Arms. I don't think most people know this. There are 65 million people in the world who have lost a limb. It's an insane amount of people who've lost a limb. Arms, legs, fingers, toes. And the arm products today are so bad that only 1 in 5 people who've lost an arm choose to use one.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, there's probably some costing that's right to the point about 100K, 200K, like a lot of those people are in the developing world. Maybe there's kind of income wealth challenges there as well.
Yeah, I mean, think if you're an insurance company, Blue Shield, Anthem, Medicare, VA, and someone comes to you and says, I want to spend $150,000 on this arm that gives me 5 gestures. What? No way.
Yeah. And so you said, okay, stack rank, this is the problem, let's go. When was that? And walk us through the journey today.
So that would have been, I guess I started rotating around this probably 2017, 2018. I mean, it was a little while ago, but we were obviously fully heads down on Bebo. And then when we sold that, I sort of took a couple months to research the space. I literally went to conferences for people who'd lost limbs and prosthetists. I went to their conferences, just meet people, learn about the space, see if it was actually something I could be helpful with.
And probably the more conversations you had, the more people you met, the more you were like, whoa, there's more and more and more problems. And it just increased the conviction.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. It was a lot. So in mid 2019, we started to think around what we might want to do here. That would have been mostly me and Doug back in those days, our chief design officer, Doug Satzker. And then COVID happened. So we figured, well, why don't we take a little bit of a break? We relaxed for about a year and tried to just use that time to kind of figure out a little bit more. But, we couldn't get a team in a physical office, which is really hard for hardware. And then sort of late 2020, early 2021, really got cracking on it. And so we've been working on our architecture and foundation for just about a year and a half now.
And what is the time span, the timeline look like? I mean, this is obviously not it's not like an e-commerce website that you ship next week. So how long does it take, and what are the kind of milestones, and where are you on that journey?
Well, okay, how long does normal hardware take? Let's call it, I don't know, 1 to 2 years maybe. We're probably 3 years, from start to finish till the product's in market. So it's about a year and a half away from today. And most of that looks like the first half is basically architecture, and the second half is iteration, or in the industry, you'd call it the XVT process, which is where you do all sorts of validation testing around the design and the engineering and everything.
Got it. And obviously, that's going to take a lot of capital, which is where WeFunder comes in. Is WeFunder the only capital you've raised today? Had you raised other capital before your first campaign there?
A little. I had self-funded it for a while, and then we did take a small outside check from an institutional investor. But honestly, and I really mean this, I love the concept of going to the crowd or going to retail investors, whatever you want to call people, I think a lot of these terms are just bad too, by the way. Like I'm pretty outspoken about not liking the term crowdfunding. I think it's kind of a 4-letter word, has a ton of baggage.
Tyler, you are speaking our language. We are in the process. I don't know if you know this, but we're in the process of basically trying to reposition crowdfunding. Which one is like, oh, you mean Kickstarter? Is it like Kickstarter? No.
Right.
And two, like, who wants to raise from the crowd? You know, the crowd is kind of impersonal. So we're kind of trying to shift the language and use this term community round, right? So you're running a community round. You run a friends and family round, raise from your friends and family. You run an angel round, raise from angel investors. You run a community round, you're raising from your community. And for you, like, I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to read the investor notes on WeFunder campaigns, right? So when you make an investment in WeFunder, as you know, you check out, and then it's like, okay, do you want to write Tyler a message, right? And not everyone does it, but you know, I don't know how many investor notes you've got now from your two WeFunder campaigns with Atomlens, but I just, you know, and we see a lot of these come in, but all of us, you just love reading the Atomlens ones because you know, I'm sure you've read more of them than I have, but it's like, you know, these military veterans and saying, you know, my colleague, my comrade, you know, kind of lost a limb. If, you know, if I can be an investor and be a part of something that's like gonna make a better life for him and, you know, people who are in a similar situation, I want to do it, you know. And it just, you've raised from your community, and it's really, really cool to see the reasons and the motivations people have for investing in Atomlens. It's really inspiring.
It's wild.
I trust you're kind of a fan of that, you know, kind of repositioning from equity crowdfunding to community rounds.
Definitely. I think community round is like an upgrade for sure. I think from a founder perspective, or at least maybe founder and me personally, I think that we have a little bit of a different campaign maybe, or a different raise than some others might because of the nature of what we're doing and our team and everything. But B, you know, I think that what do founders ultimately want out of all this? You know, like capital is still the biggest thing. You need capital to get to market and to do things. And unless that changes sometime soon, unless we get rid of the concept of money in the next 5 years, I think that's probably going to stay that way for a while. And I think of it more like in the grand arc of history, it's like VC was just one thing. Private equity is just one thing. You know, debt is just one thing. Loans are one thing. Community rounds, you know, equity crowdfunding, whatever you call it, it's just one thing. And the point is to go find your people who share your crazy. And, you know, then they have the capital, you have the team, and that's what makes magic happen. So to me, you know, we've had some checks that have come into our rounds that are bigger than venture investors have put in before and previous companies have done. You know, so it's not like it's just, you know, small checks. It's not just sort of like quote unquote country club or hobby investors, anything like that. There's like venture capitalists that put money into our company through WeFunder. I think it's just kind of the new way of doing it. I think it's going to start to carve out its own path over the next 10, 20 years that when we look back is going to just look like, oh, that's kind of the default actually, you know, like in the same way that like we just use the internet for everything now because we have access to everything. If you want access to capital, like why would you go and try to find contact information for a bunch of for like basically 10 or 20 people who have $1 million checks randomly and try to get your way into connecting with them versus like open up around and use the power of the internet to get to as many people who share your crazy as possible. It's really weird to me that it's still constrained in the way that it is.
I love that. I love the use of the language, share your crazy. I feel like our founder Nick would really love that choice of wording as well. So what, and for me, you know, right now, at least for me, I think it's both, right? If you can raise there's, you know, it depends on which VC, I guess, and who and the motivation, etc. But obviously, you know, VCs can add a lot of value. You get the kind of that side of things. You also get the community, customers, you know, users, people that share your crazy, and there's kind of benefits from both sides. But, you know, for you, love that. You know, that's the vision. That's where we're going. We want this to be the norm. Yeah, every company. It doesn't even need to be B2C, right? But every company, like you're raising from your community, that's going to do good things for your growth, accelerate your growth, recruit this army of people that can help you. But for you, like, what was it about this way of raising capital that like was appealing?
Honestly, it's super clear to me. There's a few things. One was, as someone who's just been a serial entrepreneur for a long time, I started my first business, Tyler the Techie, when I was 17 years old. It was just PC repair, little kid living in Minnesota.
I would trust Tyler the Techie.
Yeah.
If this laptop breaks during this interview, then I want Tyler the Techie to come fix it.
All right, well, you just call me next time you have some home IT needs or something. To me, I've always wanted to have customer investors. My first business, I had some customer investors. It was a small business and it was a very small amount of money, but that was, I was a teenager and I had that and it sparked it for me. And then the next 10 years of my life was raising capital from people I never knew before I raised capital from them. That's fine. It's totally fine. So that's the first thing. I just always have genuinely wanted to have customer investors. Second thing is, this is my fourth company. Ideally, this is, my last company. This is my life's mission. I think a lot of the founding team feels like that. Everyone,
That's
like
cool.
we want to do really
cool.
big things.
Yeah.
But so what does that mean then? So we absolutely could go raise more venture or private equity or anything, but this is a special company to us. And I use that phrase, share the crazy, a lot, actually. And to me, we are still risky because we're still a startup, but I do think this is de-risked more than a lot of other companies. And so we had a higher level of comfort going to the crowd, so to speak, and saying, hey, look, it's still an early stage company. You still need to assume your money's going to go to zero, right? You can't, there's no guarantees. But otherwise, what would people do? They'd have to wait until we IPO to get in. And that loses all the benefit. Like, if you're a retail investor and you have to wait for companies to go public, you lose basically all the upside. Venture capitalists get everything.
So that's kind of the idea of like, you want to, if you're going to slave away at a big company, that's your life's mission, and make it go really big, wouldn't it be cool to let your community and people that share the crazy benefit from building wealth with you, as well as VCs, or maybe instead of VCs?
Exactly. If you're the kind of person who is already investing in later stage companies or public companies, you probably also want to try to get in some early stage companies. You maybe adjust your risk accordingly, but you want to do it. And you just don't have access until, WeFunder came along, basically. So that was really exciting. The third thing too, though, is this was a little bit serendipitous, but sort of the way that we found out about, this option, this equity crowdfunding option, I've been paying attention to this since the Jobs Act was passed. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. And what actually happened was I was self-funding the company. We could have frankly, I probably could have self-funding it to go until we went to market. But I think that this is a special time. So what we said was, hey, there's a pandemic happening. We can be a little bit more considerate about this. Wouldn't it be cool to invite people to come along the journey with us the whole ride? And it just felt right. I mean, it's like sort of when you're buying a house, like, you can have all the checklists in the world of what you want in a house, but when you see the one you want, you just know it, right? You just feel it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I could sort of feel this tectonic shift happening of the way that companies are starting to raise money. And the last thing I'll say is, I think tactically this is true, but it's, there was a higher level desire. Hardware companies and hard tech companies have a valley of death for sure in the beginning. If you don't get capital enough to get to market, and that's usually measured in years, you're just going to fall on your face. So venture capitalists, PE, and everything else right now really do not fill that gap for most hardware companies. It's easier with software because it's smaller amount of money, smaller teams, faster iteration to get to market. But with hardware, that pre-seed seed stage when you got to raise $1 to $5 million, something like that, you could bang your head against the wall for a year trying to deal with hardware. And we've done that in previous companies. And so we just said, okay, look, this is a special time. All these things are connecting. It's clearly desire for people to want to invest in the company. We went out, we tested, and we saw that immediately people were biting it. And so we just said, well, why don't we just keep doing it? It's a pretty special thing.
Love it. Have you had examples of where, I mean, you've had all those notes. I don't know if you've kind of got to know any of the investors, or if you've had examples. I mean, maybe it's kind of too early for this. You don't have like a product in the market that, you know, people can go and like share about and like recruit customers for.
Yeah, but there's like a lot people can get attached to without a product, right?
Right.
So there's like the vision, the team, the mission, updates on the prototype, all that.
Are you getting value out of investors at this stage? I mean, maybe you're getting kind of the emotional like validation. It probably feels super awesome to have these thousands of investors and they're writing you all these encouraging notes. There's probably some small value in that, but any kind of more kind of tangible value yet as well, or still early?
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably some stuff I just can't talk about, but like categorically, I can just say, like what matters to us as a company is, you know, we got to make a great product people love. We got to make sure it gets reimbursed by insurance. We got to make sure it gets cleared by the FDA. There's a lot of stuff like that. And surprisingly, there are actually some really killer investors who have invested through WeFunder that have helped open some doors for us there. Like, I don't know that we necessarily needed that assist, but it did just make it easier, and it was really cool. Someone like,
WeFunder will take the assist. We'll take the credit.
Yeah,
don't worry about that.
Totally. I mean, at the end of the day, even without the assist, the notes are incredible. I mean, we have a Slack channel where we pipe all of them in, and the team sees all of them coming in.
That's too, man. We have this investment Slack channel. Every time someone makes an investment, and then if there's a note, we see that as well. And you know, when I first joined, it was like, you know, it would like ping every like few days.
Yeah.
And now it's like ping, 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 ping. And whenever Atomlens launches, then boom, it's exploding.
That's really cool.
And obviously, yeah, this is the second campaign. It's live right now. What lessons have you learned from, you know, the 2 WeFunder rounds that you've done now? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
Boy, that's a good question. A lot. Let me think about it for a second. You know, I think there's like the tactical things that I've definitely learned that I wish I would have known before we did it. It just would have made it easier. And then there's like I wish there was a better word for this. I'm going to hate myself. Like the vibe, like the vibe lessons of it.
No, I like that word actually.
Tactically, you know, there's just things like what is really the name of the game here? Audience size is a big part of it, right? Like, yes, it's still a funnel, like many things, like, you know, getting customers. There is one way of doing it, which is that's going to sound super crass, but like pour in 1,000 people on the top and convert 1% on the bottom, right? And then just keep doing that over and over.
Another way of doing it is like very curated, like, you know, 7 people in the top and 42 of them invest.
Totally. And I think that what I have definitely learned is it's kind of both. You know, there's a really big power law to this. So like when I looked at the first round that we did, you know, about half of it came from, you know, a few dozen really big checks. And then the other half came from like 2,000 people, you know. Vibe though, you know, I think that like tactically, I think there's definitely a playbook, or there's a series of playbooks that I wish I probably just would have had. It's sort of like, you know, how do you apply for college? You know, it's just good to know how you do it before you actually do it. The vibe though, let me tell you, kind of to your point about the notes, the biggest difference I have seen in raising a retail round versus an institutional round is that it's basically thousands of people telling you yes constantly versus like 100 people telling you no and then 3 say yes.
That's so cool. And a lot of people are telling you no, right? Like there's a million investors on WeFunder, like the vast majority of those have not invested in Atomlens.
Right.
But the no's are invisible.
Exactly. You don't see them.
So many more yeses. So I never really thought of that before. That's such a powerful and cool insight.
Yeah, I've helped a number of other founders, you know, to try to get booted up into this space. And that's probably the first thing I tell them usually actually is just mental health wise, even like, I feel like it's a healthier way to go for a lot of people. Now, that said, for example, with one of the tactical things, it is still work, right? You still have to do it. You have to put in the effort. You got to put in the time. It would be crazy to think otherwise. And I think to your point earlier, when people think of crowdfunding, quote unquote, and they think Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and stuff like that, they do kind of think it's like, oh, just turn on the spigot. People will come in and then turn it off.
Okay,
it doesn't work that way.
For you. And this might be, you might have a different answer than the average founder because this is your 4th rodeo and you've had investors before. And so I would imagine like, it'll be easier for you to open the the kind of big, guarded doors with the whatever, protection on Sand Hill Road than your average first-time founder.
Yeah, I want to see these doors. I imagine like Jurassic Park doors for a second.
Yeah, exactly. There's the Swiss guards from where they guard the Pope. They're outside these doors, and there's a dragon and a trapdoor, and the dragons are breathing fire. So it's really hard to get through the door is the point. But you probably know the secret password because this isn't your first startup. But all that being said, you say, it's not like click a button. Usually it's not press a button and raise, $2 million from 2,000 people. Is it easier or harder? Has it been easier? It would have been easier for you to go the VC route, you think?
No, I don't think it would have been easier. I don't know that it would have been harder either, though. I think they're both just things you have to do.
They're different.
Yeah. That said, though, I mean, at a high level, I think there's really just one question anyone needs to ask. If you're going to go and try to raise money for a company at any stage, any amount of money, the first question is just, what are the easy checks and what are the hard checks? And I don't mean to seem too clinical about that, but like, if you know a bunch of VCs who want to put money in you and you have great relationships with them and they love this new thing you're doing, then just go to them, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Don't go to the retail side just because. And then on the flip side, if you don't live near Sand Hill Road, you don't live in Silicon Valley, yes, there are VCs in other parts of the world, but that's the largest amount of them. And retail might be easier and faster for you. I also think on average, probably going the retail route is much harder for most people because they're not used to doing this kind of like growth engine game of like, look, you have to get people and you have to get them excited. There is kind of a psychology to it. But at the end of the day, there's only one thing that matters to getting people to invest in your company, which is the shared excitement. They got to be excited. You got to be excited. And I don't mean interested, I mean excited. Right. And so that's why I use the term share your crazy.
That's why for me, like, I've been thinking about this recently, that of the two approaches to the funnel that you mentioned, right? Where one is like 1,000 people in the top, 1% at the bottom, and the other is like 100 in the top. It's like, because you've got to be excited, I'm thinking more and more like you want to target. It's like, you got to be super targeted, right? To the people that really, really want what you're building, or really, really, and it doesn't necessarily, it could be they really, really know and love and trust Tyler. It's not necessarily the mission of Atomlens, but to really be kind of targeted, especially in the early days as you're building up momentum on the campaign. It's not saying you should do the Facebook post and the LinkedIn post and whatever, but like, I think early on, the more targeted you can be, the more likely it is you get that excitement level that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really important there, actually. One of the probably best things I ever learned about raising money, and I learned this really early on, is, let me use like a different analogy for a second. If you wanted to buy a plane ticket in coach or first class, a lot of people will say, for example, and I think rightfully so, like, well, first class is way too expensive, right? It feels like it's too expensive. But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what first class is. First class is coach for wealthy people. Airlines don't design first class as like, ooh, this upgrade for everyone who's in coach. Now that sounds really shitty, right? But it is true. You're not meant as like we people, us peons who fly in coach, we're not meant to fly in first class. It's the same raising money from people. There's no difference between someone who puts $100 check or $1 million check in your company. You just need to share the excitement. To someone who has $1 million, they probably have $100 million fund. And to them, putting in $1 million check is like doing $100 for someone who has a $10,000 fund or bank account. So I think there's a lot of demystifying that needs to happen around raising money in general. I think doubly so around venture, and I think triply so around doing retail. And I really honestly think that retail and institutional, or call it equity crowdfunding versus VC, is really not much difference at all. I actually think there's almost no difference, other than institutionals have been doing it for decades and there's a whole kind of industry and culture around it. But I've had super sophisticated people come in through the retail side. I've worked with VCs in the past who really didn't want to do anything more than put capital in. I mean, it's just different check sizes and different types of people with different levels of excitement.
Couple of last questions. one, really curious to know what the future holds for Atomlens. I mean, I guess, continuing to work on the product. I think you said a year or a year and a half out in terms of the launch. What does the future look like?
Well, yeah, we're aiming to be in market in 2023. So call it 12 to 18 months from now. We aim to have the first product out. That would be the Atom Touch, which is our above elbow arm. So this is only for people who've lost arms above their elbow. It will have everything, we talked about in the past. We're aiming for it. Our product goals, you could call them, are individual finger control and movement, near full human range of motion. So that means being able to use all the joints, including your fingers, move your fingers, raise your arm above your head, which you can't do with any product today. Basic sense of touch, very light, very power efficient, very comfortable, wear it all day, every day, and for a much more affordable price point, much more like $20,000 range. And after that, we plan on keeping it rolling. So, call it probably a hand after that, and then an above knee leg after that, and keep going from there. And our intention is to definitely reverse engineer the human body and make it better so we can give people their limbs back. And ideally long term, spines, eyes, ears, everything.
It's amazing, man. Really, really exciting. Last question we ask every guest. You've started a few companies now. One piece of advice for founders who are building their startups.
Okay, here's not the advice, but I'll be crass. The best way to be a first-time founder is to be a second-time founder. Now, that's not actually good advice. So
if you're working on your first company, just immediately quit, guys. You throw it in the towel, start the next one.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that this advice would actually be helpful, but I do think it is honestly the best advice I could give someone. There is no one right way to build a company. And what I mean something very specific by that, though. In Silicon Valley, there is a huge culture around like lean startups, right? Like, lean startup. We've all heard of lean startup, MVPs, lean startups, all this stuff. That's totally valid way of building a company or a product, but there's only one way of doing it. I have done it. I've started 4 different companies. I've done it 4 very different ways. I've advised and invested in dozens of companies. They've all basically had their own path. There is some connective tissue, sure, with concepts like lean startup and that. But the point of this is the only thing that matters is you just need to keep moving. There is no one right way. Don't get stuck in reading blogs. Don't get stuck listening to podcasts. As much as I love listening to my own voice and chatting with you, Jonny. Like we're two super smart dudes. Come on, right? But
extremely smart.
Yeah, exactly. Smart and handsome. Yeah. But you just need to keep moving. You need to keep moving. And that's how you prevent your company from dying. And that's how you keep it going. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. Don't get me wrong. But I think that that's honestly what it takes. And I wish someone had told me that and just said, hey, you're going to have peaks and valleys. You just need to keep moving and just try on the whole to be consistently better, right? In 52 weeks in a year, you're going to have 8 down weeks, but take the other 44 and just try to make them net positive. And over time, on average, you'll keep improving.
That's awesome, man. That's a really great note to end on. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
We'll speak soon.
Yeah, sounds good, bud.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Adventure Capital. I hope you laughed, took notes, shed a tear, and most importantly, feel ready to go off on your own adventure. And remember, whenever you're ready, WeFunders here to help. Be sure to like and leave a review, gang.